Alright guys, so we're going to try this and see if this will help a little bit. So we did chapter 1 last time, and we finished on this page. If you turn the page, we should be on page 12 now, and we are on chapter 2, Early America. And some vocabulary words to look at are continents, eventually, explorers, and discovered. And I'll try to remember this time as well. When it's time to turn the page, if you're not sure when to turn it, you should be able to hear this little squeaky dog toy, and that'll be a reminder to turn the page. So let's start reading here on page 12. Long ago, half of the world did not even know about America. Most people lived on the other side of the world. Our world has 7 large masses of land called continents, and you can see this, and we've talked about continents before in the past. Our home, the United States of America, can be found in North America, but the people living on the other side of the world did not know about the Americas. Eventually, explorers crossed the ocean and discovered what must have felt like a whole new world. In fact, that is what they called it, the New World. And squeak it toy at the same time. Alright, so we're going to talk about Native Americans. Before the New World was discovered, there were people living all across America. Who were these first Americans? If you guessed Indians, you are right. You may have also heard of the name Native Americans. Because the word native means of an original home, one way to describe the people who lived in America first is Native Americans. America has always been their home. Native American tribes had their own languages. Many had their own special way of building homes and providing food for their people. Let's learn more about their life in America. So we're going to talk about the Northeast Native Americans. The Native Americans of the Northeast were farmers. They planted crops of corn, beans, squash, and pumpkins. They were also good hunters. They used bows and arrows to hunt for deer and wild turkeys. Many of them lived in wigwams, or long houses. Wigwams were rounded wooden buildings covered with bark or woven mats. Long houses were built like wigwams, but they were much longer. They might be 100 feet long. Several families might live in a long house. These were the Indians that the Pilgrims knew. In the Southeast, some Native Americans lived in buildings with thatched roofs, open sides, and a raised floor. These houses were called chickees. Other tribes lived in a small house like a log cabin covered with bark and mud. So what are the 3 different kinds of houses we said so far? So you said wigwams, long houses, and chickees. We'll turn the page. Now we're on page 16. So here in this side, it talks about how to weave a mat. This is something you can do on your own if you want to, but it's not required. So now we're going to talk about the Southwest Native Americans, and we have some vocabulary up here. Pueblos, hogan, jewelry, and then turquoise, which is a blue-green kind of stone. So many Native Americans of the Southwest lived in pueblos, which are houses cut out of rock or built from rocks. They may also be made of clay and straw. These homes worked well in warm, dry areas. Pueblo houses were often joined together. They might be several stories high, and many families lived there. Others lived in hogans. They were made with wooden poles and covered with tree bark or grass and mud. The doorway to a hogan always faced east so that it could catch the morning sun. So we've talked also about pueblos and hogans. These Indians were skilled craftsmen and made beautiful jewelry from silver and turquoise. They also wove baskets. The Native Americans of the Northwest were very good at fishing. They caught salmon and trout from the rivers. From the ocean, they caught whales and seals. They lived in the woods and hunted animals such as elk, deer, and bear. They also collected nuts and berries. During the spring and summer, these Indians found enough food to last them through the winter. They became very skillful in working with wood. They made canoes and beautiful boxes. Their homes were made of wood. Have you ever seen a totem pole? These carvings were made by the Northwest Indians. And let's look at the did you know? Did you know that very few Native Americans lived in teepees? Teepees were mostly used by the Plains Indians when they went on their hunting trips. The teepees were used like tents. They could be set up quickly at night and taken down in the morning. Can you name these Native American dwellings in their region of the country? So let's look at these here. We have the Northeast. We have the wigwams, the longhouses. The Southeast, where we have the chickees. There's also log cabins covered with bark and mud. We have the Southwest. They lived in pueblos and hogans. And then we have the Northwest, and these are the ones that they used teepees when they went on their hunting trips. Okay. Oh, in the Northwest here with their canoes. Okay, and turn the page. At first, there were only Native Americans living in America. Then people from other countries heard about the New World. Soon, many of these people came to this land. Some came for freedom of worship. Some came to own their own land. Some came for riches. Some came for adventure. Some came to work. As you can see, there were many reasons people left their homes to come to America. A brand new land awaited them. Then over here, it says, write the letter of the correct answer on the line. Of course, actually don't write in your books, but think of the correct letter. And the answers may be used more than once. I'm going to cover up my answers. So number 1, lived in houses of wood. Was it A, Northeast Native Americans, B, Southeast Native Americans, C, Southwest Native Americans, or D, Northwest Native Americans? So that was D, Northwest Native Americans. Number 2, lived in wigwams or long houses. If you guessed A, Northeast, you were correct. Number 3, lived in pueblos or hogans. C, Southwest Native Americans. Number 4, lived in chickees or log cabins. B, Southeast. Number 5, very good fishermen. D, Northwest Native Americans. Number 6, farmers who planted corn, beans, squash, and pumpkins. That was Northeast. Number 7, skilled wood workers who made totem poles. D, Northwest, skilled craftsmen who made jewelry and baskets. C, Southwest. Okay, so why did Native Americans use teepees? For hunting trips. And then think to yourself, would it be fun to travel like the Native Americans did? Why or why not? And change the page. Okay, so here we're going to talk about Scrooby, England, threatened, Holland, pilgrims, and separatists. Separatists. Long ago in Scrooby, England, there lived a group of people called separatists. These people loved England but were not happy with some of its laws. The King of England also ruled the Church of England. King James said, "Everyone must go to my church and worship just as I say." The separatists wanted to separate from the Church of England. They wanted to worship God the way they believed the Bible told them to. That is how they came to be called separatists. So let's find out about their story. So we're going to be talking about Patience. Patience's story. Hello, my name is Patience. We knew obeying God was more important than attending the church the king commanded us to. We decided to have our own secret church meetings, but the king soon found out. He threatened to put us in jail. The king sent soldiers to spy on us. Sadly, we made plans to go to another country, Holland. In Holland, we could worship as the Bible taught us. Our plans to leave England had to be made secretly because King James would not let us leave. If we tried to leave, we would be put in jail. We made plans with the captain of an English ship. The greedy captain said he would not tell the soldiers about us if we paid him a lot of money. It was the only chance we had, so my father and others sadly paid the captain most of our money. The night came for us to leave. I was scared but excited. Quietly, we left our house. In the dark, quiet hours of the early morning, our group waited for a ship. At last, the ship came, and we hurried on board. We thought that all danger was over, but we did not know we had been tricked. The ship's captain had told the king's soldiers our plan. Soon we heard the splash, splash of the soldiers' oars as they paddled their way to the ship. Oops. Every separatist was taken off the ship. Now we were prisoners, even the little children. Everything we owned was taken away. The greedy captain had planned all of this. Now he would keep all of our money without taking us anywhere. Back in town, every separatist, men, women, and children, was put in jail for a month. It was terrible. At the end of the month, we were allowed to go back to our homes. They won't try that again, the king must have thought. Was he right? More secretly than ever, we again made plans to leave for Holland. Everyone was excited. This time we found a captain from Holland who had a small ship of his own. He said we could trust him to keep our secret. One by one, we sold our homes and our belongings. On a certain day, all the women took the children for a boat ride. Our boat was to meet the Dutch ship. That night, the men would walk down to the shore and meet the ship. While waiting for the ship to come, my mother and other women got seasick. Our boat was rowed into a gentle creek where the waves would not bother us, but the creek was not deep. Soon the tide went out, leaving our boat stuck in the mud. When the Dutch ship came, our boat was stuck. It would stay stuck until the tide came in. The Dutch captain saw what had happened. Since the separatist men were ready, he took all of them on board first. Just as the men boarded his ship, the captain saw English soldiers marching over the hill. He knew there was no time to rescue the women. Everyone would be caught if he did. He was also afraid that the English soldiers would take his boat away. Frightened, he pulled up the ship's anchor and sailed away with all the separatist men. The men would have done anything to help us. The women cried for their husbands, and the other children and I cried for our fathers, but it was too late. Those soldiers must have felt silly marching down the street with women and children as prisoners. They took us to the judges. But the judges did not know what to do. Go back to your homes, the judges ordered. But, cried my mother and the other women, we have no homes. We sold them. The women wept for their husbands. We children cried for our fathers. And the judges shook their heads. Maybe they felt like crying too. What a sight it was. Finally, the judges said, send them to Holland to be with their husbands and fathers. Do you think that God forgot to look after the separatists? Well, God always watches over his people. Although trouble may come, he will help us through it. And we can remember this verse to help us in time of trouble in Psalm 34:15. The eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and his ears are open unto their cry. What a happy day it was when my mother and I and the other separatist wives and children stepped off the boat in Holland. You can be sure that there were happy husbands and fathers there to greet us. In Holland, we could worship God freely, but we were not as happy as we had hoped. My father and the other men wanted to be farmers as they had been in England, but they had no money to buy farms. They had to work in factories instead. We soon found that Holland is very different from England. The Dutch language and way of life were not what we were used to. As time went by, my friends and I were forgetting England. We wanted to speak Dutch instead of English. How sad this made our parents. We must do something, they thought. Some of the separatists asked, why not go to America? We heard about people already living in America called Indians. We trusted that if we were peaceful and friendly, they would live peacefully with us. So our families decided to go. Strangers, a group of people who came to America for adventure. We're going to start with the Pilgrims. After many prayers and much hard work, a small group of separatists sailed back to England. There they met other people who wanted to sail to America. Since the separatists did not know these people, they called them strangers. The strangers wanted to go to America for a different reason than the separatists. They hoped to find new work and adventure there. Remember, the separatist reason for traveling to America was that they wanted freedom to worship God. Because all were traveling together to a strange new land, they were all called pilgrims. The day finally arrived. On September 6th, 1620, a ship called the Mayflower set sail for America. On board were 102 passengers. There were also 20 sailors on board. They laughed at the separatists, making fun of their prayers. Do you think this made the separatists ashamed to pray? No, indeed. They kept praying and asking for God's help. The captain of the Mayflower was Master Jones. He was an excellent captain. Unlike his sailors, he was very kind to the separatists. Life aboard the Mayflower. For 65 days, the Mayflower sailed the Atlantic Ocean. The water the Pilgrims had was stored in barrels. This water quickly became stale. There was no water for baths or for washing clothes, but some of the boys did not seem to mind. There were no vegetables, fruits, or fresh meat to eat. After the dried food that they had brought with them was gone, they ate crackers and stale bread. Yet they continued to thank God for his goodness. He was sending them to a country where they could be free to worship him. Can you imagine how the ocean's high waves tossed their small ship? Many of the pilgrims became seasick. All of the Mayflower's passengers and belongings were crammed together. Some of them even had to sleep inside a small boat that the Mayflower carried to use in America. And if we looked here, the Mayflower would have looked very tiny beside today's ocean-going ships. Land ho! On the morning of November 11, 1620, how happy and thankful the pilgrims were to hear the cry, "Land ho!" Even though they were eager to get on land, they remembered to thank God first. It took many weeks to find a safe place to build their homes. They had to be near fresh drinking water as well as a harbor for ships. There was no one to greet the pilgrims in America. They had no stores to go to for food and supplies. They had to do everything for themselves, but they trusted God to take care of them. It's easy to see the pilgrims were brave people. They had faced danger and hard times in getting to America, and now they faced hard times again. That first winter, over half of them died from hunger and sickness. They could have grumbled and complained. Instead, they praised God and asked for his help. God was good to them. In the spring, the pilgrims did become friends with the Indians. With their help, the pilgrims planted seeds. In the fall, the pilgrims harvested so much food they had a Thanksgiving feast. God gave the pilgrims courage to trust his plan for them. God then used their story to begin the story of America. Psalm 107 is a Bible passage written about the Hebrew children. It tells the story of how God led them out of Egypt and helped them in other times of need. Can you find some parts of their story that remind you of the pilgrim's story? Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he hath redeemed from the hand of the enemy, and gathered them out of the lands from the east and from the west, from the north and from the south. They wandered in the wilderness in a solitary way. They found no city to dwell in. Hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted in them. Then they cried unto the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them out of their distresses. And he led them forth by the right way, that they might go to a city of habitation. Oh, that men would praise the Lord for his goodness, and for his wonderful works to the children of men. Psalm 107, 1-8. If you visit Plymouth Harbor in Massachusetts, you can see the Plymouth Rock. It marks the place believed to be where the pilgrims landed. The date 1620 stands for the year the Mayflower brought the pilgrims to America. So do you remember, let's think about some things before we go on. What was the name of the pilgrim ship? The Mayflower. Number 2, in what year did the pilgrims come to America? 1620. Number 3, who was not friendly to the pilgrims on the Mayflower? The sailors. Number 4, who was friendly to the pilgrims on the Mayflower? Captain. Number 5, what caused many pilgrims to die during the first winter? Sickness and hunger. Number 6, who helped the pilgrims learn to live in America? Indians. And number 7, who was with the pilgrims through all of their hard times? God. So list some things we have in America today that the pilgrims did not have. And remember to thank God for all the things he has given us. So electricity, TV, bathrooms, running water, cars, things like that. Those would be good things to thank God for all the things that we have, because the pilgrims didn't have those. Then we're going to read on about a lasting friendship. Do you remember the pilgrims' first winter in America? It was a very, very hard winter. The next winter was much better thanks to their Native American friends. This friendship helped them survive and be successful in America. That first spring, the pilgrims made a lasting friendship with an Indian named Squanto. The pilgrims were surprised to find that he spoke English. Squanto chose to live with the pilgrims because his tribe had all died in a great sickness. Through Squanto's help, most of the neighboring tribes made peace with the pilgrims. Some tribes proved to be great friends. The pilgrims had never seen corn before. They did not know how to plant it or eat it. The Indians called corn by a different name, maize. Squanto told the pilgrims that when the oak tree leaves were as big as a mouse's ear, it was time to plant the corn. What season of the year would that be? Squanto and his friends Do you think that would be the spring? Squanto and his Indian friends were good farmers. Patiently, Squanto taught the pilgrims to dig a small hole in the soil. How the pilgrim boys and girls' eyes popped when Squanto dropped a small fish into the hole with the seed. A dead fish with seeds! The fish was used to fertilize or add nutrients to the soil. Sometimes Squanto would drop a pumpkin seed, bean, or squash seed into the hole. Pumpkins and squash were new to the pilgrims, too. After the crops grew, the Indians taught the pilgrims many ways to prepare food. These are the ways the Indians taught the pilgrims to prepare corn. So cornbread, roasting the ears of corn, hominy, and cornmeal. And then here's something you can try if you want to have your own maize. Okay. Ways the Native Americans helped the pilgrims. There are plenty of fish in the streams, but the pilgrims had no nets or hooks to catch them. The Native Americans showed them how to weave nets out of the tall, dry grass that grew along the banks. There were deer in the forest, but the pilgrims were not able to shoot many of them. The deer always ran away. The Native Americans showed the pilgrims how to sneak up on the deer. The pilgrims had to pay for the trip across the Atlantic aboard the Mayflower. They sent many boatloads of animal skins and furs back to England. How did the pilgrims get the skins and furs? The Indians traded many furs for knives and beads. Without help from the Native Americans, the pilgrims might never have had a Thanksgiving feast. They had corn, squash, and pumpkins stored away for their second winter. They also knew how to catch fish and hunt woodland animals so they could eat meat throughout the winter. The pilgrims had homes to stay in. Because of their Indian friends, their second year in America was much more pleasant than the first. Thanksgiving Day, which is we celebrate it every fourth Thursday in November. Almost every country in the world celebrates special holidays such as Christmas and Easter. But there are some special days that only Americans celebrate. We call them patriotic holidays or American holidays. These days celebrate the birthdays of famous Americans and special days in America's past. Thanksgiving Day is one of our special days. The Pilgrims had their first Thanksgiving feast in 1621. They had much to be thankful for. Can you think of some things Americans can be thankful for today? Thanksgiving might be your favorite holiday. Maybe it's a special time of year you travel to see your grandparents or other family members. You probably enjoy good food. Did you know America did not always celebrate Thanksgiving the way it does now? After 1621, there were special days of Thanksgiving for many different things. Whenever anything happened that Americans wanted to praise the Lord for, they would have a special day of Thanksgiving and prayer. In 1698, Maryland had a day of Thanksgiving because a terrible sickness that had come upon many people had ended. In 1789, President George Washington proclaimed a day of Thanksgiving for a new and free country. Later, President Lincoln proclaimed the fourth Thursday in November as a day of Thanksgiving for our country. That has been our Thanksgiving Day ever since. What are the days do you think we should be thankful for? Okay, so true or false? Squanto chose to live with the Pilgrims. True. Number 2, maize is a kind of fish. False. Number 3, the Pilgrims taught the Indians how to eat corn. False. Number 4, there were plenty of fish in the streams, but at first the Pilgrims had no way to catch them. True. Number 5, the Pilgrims paid for their trip on the Mayflower by sending furs and animal skins back to England. True. Something to think about. Why do you think Squanto helped the Pilgrims? And that's it for Chapter 2.